Hey man, most guys talk themselves out of power without even realizing it. They think strength is proving a point, defending themselves, having the last word, explaining their side perfectly so she finally gets it. But the more you try to win verbally, the more you lose position emotionally, because not every moment requires a response. Not every accusation deserves clarification. Sometimes the most controlled move you can make is stepping back and saying nothing at all. When emotions rise, people look for reactions. They want feedback. They want reassurance, they want resistance, they want something they can push against. And when you immediately respond, you give them material to work with, you give them energy, you give them engagement. But when you stay composed and hold your ground without rushing to speak, the dynamic shifts. The emotional storm doesn't know where to land. Most men speak from discomfort. A harsh comment hits their ego and they react. A cold tone triggers insecurity and they react. A threat of leaving activates fear and they react. Reaction is easy, control is difficult, and the man who can sit in discomfort without scrambling to correct it shows a level of stability that can't be faked. That steadiness communicates more than 1,000 defensive explanations ever could. There's something powerful about not chasing every misunderstanding. When she says you've changed, the insecure man panics and tries to prove he hasn't. The grounded man listens, evaluates, and if the statement doesn't align with truth, he doesn't argue, he doesn't spiral. He lets the weight of his consistency speak over time, because arguments rarely convince, patterns do. The truth is, many emotional escalations are tests of stability, not calculated tests, not malicious traps, but subconscious probes. People push where they sense instability. If you wobble, they push harder. If you remain centered, the push loses force. When you refuse to match intensity with intensity, you interrupt the cycle, and interruption is power. You don't need to respond to every mood shift. You don't need to decode every sigh. You don't need to fix every wave of tension. Sometimes the healthiest move is allowing emotions to pass without attaching yourself to them. When you stop acting like you're responsible for managing someone else's feelings, you reclaim energy that should have been yours all along. Think about it. When someone is trying to provoke you and you stay calm, who looks stronger? The one escalating, or the one observing? The one defending every sentence, or the one who doesn't feel threatened by noise? Composure under pressure creates mystery. It creates gravity. It forces the other person to reflect instead of react. Most men fear that if they don't immediately speak, they'll lose control, lose the argument, lose her. But often the opposite happens. When you don't jump to defend yourself, you communicate that you don't fear losing anything, and that lack of fear changes how people approach you. They sense boundaries without you having to declare them loudly. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion, it means regulating it. There's a difference. Suppression builds resentment, regulation builds strength. You feel the irritation, you feel the urge to explain, you feel the impulse to correct. But instead of acting from that impulse, you breathe, you pause, you choose timing over urgency, and that choice alone elevates your presence. The man who controls his tongue controls his environment, because words, once released, can't be taken back. But restraint builds leverage. When you speak less, people listen more. When you react less, your reactions carry weight. And over time, others realize that if you decide to speak, it actually matters because you don't do it carelessly. Here's where it gets deeper. When you don't immediately respond, you force the other person to sit with their own words. Most people speak emotionally and rely on your reaction to validate what they just said. If you argue back, they double down. If you defend, they escalate. But when you stay composed and don't rush to fill the space, something subtle happens. They begin to hear themselves, and sometimes that self-awareness hits harder than any counter-argument you could have made. Emotional tension feeds off engagement. Think about every heated exchange you've ever had. It only grew because both sides kept adding fuel. You respond, she responds, you counter, she escalates. It becomes a loop. But when you remove your contribution to that loop, the fire doesn't know what to consume. It either burns out or exposes what was actually underneath all along. There's also something psychologically disarming about a man who doesn't flinch verbally. When you don't feel compelled to justify every decision, defend every criticism, or clarify every misunderstanding, you project self-trust, and self-trust is magnetic. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to convince you. That energy is far more powerful than a perfectly structured explanation. Most men talk because they're uncomfortable with uncertainty. They want resolution immediately. They want reassurance immediately. They want clarity now. but growth requires tolerance of uncertainty. When you can sit in that space without scrambling to resolve it, you develop emotional endurance, and emotional endurance separates the reactive from the disciplined. Sometimes she'll push harder when you don't react. She'll repeat the point, raise her tone, add more emotion. That's the moment most men break. They mistake intensity for importance, but intensity doesn't always mean depth. Sometimes it's just frustration meeting resistance. If you remain calm and steady, you demonstrate that emotional volume does not control you. And here's the paradox. The less you rush to explain yourself, the more curious she becomes about what you're thinking. When you overshare your internal dialogue constantly, there's no mystery, no depth. But when you hold space and speak only when necessary, your words carry weight. Curiosity grows in the absence of noise. This isn't about becoming cold or distant, it's about becoming selective. You still communicate, you still express, but you choose timing carefully. You don't respond from ego, you respond from clarity. That difference shifts the entire dynamic. Instead of two people reacting emotionally, it becomes one person centered and one person adjusting. There's also self-respect in not engaging with every attempt to provoke. When you argue over every small jab, you lower yourself to the level of the tension. But when you let minor provocations pass, you signal that your emotional state is not easily accessed. That alone changes how often someone even attempts to test you. Over time, this restraint builds a reputation. She begins to realize that you're not easily shaken, that dramatic swings won't pull you into chaos, that guilt tactics won't move you. And when someone understands they can't destabilize you, they either rise to your level or they remove themselves. Both outcomes serve you. The strongest presence in any room is rarely the loudest voice. It's the calmest energy, the man who doesn't rush, doesn't interrupt, doesn't defend unnecessarily. He listens, he absorbs, he chooses his moments, and when he finally speaks, it's deliberate. That level of control isn't flashy, but it commands respect in a way. Constant talking never will. When tension rises in a relationship, most men feel an urge to fix it immediately. The room feels heavy, the air feels thick, she's distant, short, maybe even cold, and instead of staying grounded, he starts scrambling internally. What did I do? How do I repair this? What should I say right now? That urgency bleeds into his tone, his posture, his energy, and the more urgent he becomes, the more she feels the imbalance, because when you rush to repair every shift in mood, you communicate that her emotional state controls the environment, but when you remain composed under tension, something powerful happens. You shift from reactive to anchored. Instead of chasing her emotional wave, you let it crest and fall on its own. You don't withdraw affection in retaliation, you don't escalate, you simply hold your frame. And that steadiness creates contrast. She begins to notice that you are not destabilized by temporary friction. That contrast alone builds a deeper form of attraction, not the spark-driven kind, but the trust-driven kind. There's a difference between avoidance and composure. Avoidance is fear disguised as detachment. Composure is strength under control. The man who avoids conflict pretends nothing is wrong. The man who is grounded acknowledges tension, but refuses to be consumed by it. He might say calmly, "We can talk about this when you're ready," and then he actually means it. He doesn't hover, he doesn't chase resolution, he allows space without losing connection to himself. Emotional storms lose intensity when they don't receive immediate resistance. Think about it, if someone throws energy at you and you don't throw it back, the momentum weakens, but if you match it, it multiplies. That's why arguments spiral so easily. Two people feeding the same fire. When you stop feeding it, you're not surrendering, you're redirecting, you're saying without words, "This isn't worth my balance." What many men don't realize is that emotional steadiness is deeply attractive, not because it's dramatic, but because it feels safe. When you don't explode, don't panic, don't chase, you signal that you are capable of handling complexity, and complexity is part of any real relationship. The man who can remain centered during discomfort becomes someone she can lean on, even if she won't admit it immediately. And here's where it gets even more important. When you speak less during conflict, you observe more. You notice patterns. You see whether the tension is about a specific issue or about control. You notice if she escalates when she doesn't get immediate reassurance. You notice if she softens when you stay grounded. Observation gives you clarity. Reactivity clouds it. This approach also protects your dignity. How many times have men said things in emotional moments that they regret later? Words spoken from ego, from hurt, from the need to win. But when you slow down and choose restraint, you protect your long-term position. You protect your identity. You avoid becoming someone you don't respect, just to win a temporary argument. Over time, your calm response reshapes the dynamic. She learns that emotional spikes won't control you. She learns that tension doesn't equal drama with you. And once that pattern is established, the frequency of emotional escalation often decreases, because instability thrives on reaction. Stability thrives on grounded leadership. And if the tension continues despite your composure, if she repeatedly tries to provoke, push, destabilize, that tells you something valuable. It tells you the issue isn't communication, it's compatibility. And when you're not reacting constantly, you have the clarity to see that. You stop trying to solve what isn't solvable. You start evaluating whether this connection aligns with your peace. The ultimate power in restraint is this: you control when and how you engage. Not your emotions, not her tone, not the intensity of the moment. You. That level of self-command transforms how you show up in every area of life, not just relationships. Because once you realize you don't have to react to everything that provokes you, you unlock a deeper form of control. Long-term respect isn't built through speeches, it's built through patterns. When you consistently refuse to be pulled into emotional chaos, a reputation forms around you. She begins to understand that dramatic spikes won't get dramatic reactions, that guilt won't bend you, that pressure won't rush you. And once that pattern is clear, the dynamic changes permanently. Because now she adjusts her approach, not because you demanded it, but because your steadiness required it. Most men don't lose respect because they're weak. They lose it because they're predictable under pressure. The moment tension rises, they react the same way every time. Defending, over-explaining, apologizing too quickly, trying to smooth everything instantly. When you break that predictability and respond with composure instead, you introduce uncertainty in a healthy way. She no longer knows she can trigger you, and that alone shifts power quietly. Here's something subtle. When you speak less during conflict, your words gain value. If you only speak when you've thought something through, when you've regulated yourself, when your tone is measured, people start listening differently. They lean in, they process, because you're not throwing emotional noise into the air, you're delivering clarity. There's also an internal shift that happens when you stop reacting to every emotional fluctuation. You begin trusting yourself more. You stop questioning your every move. You stop assuming you must fix every uncomfortable moment. That self-trust strengthens your posture, your eye contact, your tone. It makes you calmer without trying to appear calm. And authenticity in that calmness is what builds long-term attraction. Respect thrives on emotional boundaries, not loud ones, not aggressive ones, quiet ones. When she senses that certain lines won't move you, not because you're cold, but because you're grounded, she recalibrates how she engages with you. Boundaries don't need constant verbal reminders. They need consistent enforcement through behavior. Sometimes, your restraint will frustrate her initially. She may say you're distant, that you don't care enough, that you're hard to read. But often what she's really reacting to is the absence of chaos. When someone is used to high emotional feedback, steadiness can feel unfamiliar. But over time, unfamiliar stability becomes comforting. The key is not withdrawing warmth entirely. It's maintaining balance. You can still be affectionate, still attentive, still emotionally available, but you don't overextend yourself to manage her moods. You don't abandon your center to chase harmony. You allow connection, but you don't sacrifice structure. Long-term power isn't about dominating the relationship. It's about emotional leadership. When you lead emotionally, you don't get pulled into reactive cycles. You choose when to engage deeply and when to step back. You don't suppress feelings, you sequence them. You don't ignore issues, you address them at the right time, with the right energy. Over months and years, this steady presence becomes part of how she defines you. Not dramatic, not volatile, not easily shaken. And that predictability in your stability, not your reactions, creates a secure environment. Secure environments build loyalty. Loyalty builds longevity. At the end of the day, the man who controls his responses controls the rhythm of the relationship, not because he's manipulating it, but because he refuses to surrender his emotional state to someone else's fluctuations. And once you understand that your reaction is a choice, not a reflex, you realize you've had power all along. Attraction isn't just about looks, status, or charm. It's about emotional tension and release. When your reactions are automatic, predictable, and immediate, there's no tension, there's no pause, no anticipation. But when you regulate yourself and respond deliberately, you create a subtle psychological space. And in that space, intrigue grows. She starts wondering what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your next move will be. Not because you're playing games, but because you're not transparent in your impulses. Predictable emotional patterns kill intrigue. If she knows exactly how you'll respond to every mood shift, she unconsciously relaxes into control. But when your behavior is grounded and consistent, while your reactions are measured and intentional, she can't manipulate the tempo. That lack of control creates tension, not toxic tension, but stimulating tension. The kind that keeps attraction alive over time. There's something primal about a man who doesn't flinch under pressure. Throughout history, stability under stress signaled competence, safety, leadership. When you maintain your composure during emotional spikes, you communicate capability at a deep level, not loudly, not theatrically, but through your nervous system. And nervous systems read each other faster than words ever could. Think about how many men talk themselves into weakness during conflict. They reveal every insecurity in an attempt to be understood. They overshare, over-clarify, over-justify. They expose their internal panic, hoping it will create empathy. But what it often creates instead is imbalance, because emotional dumping during tension shifts the weight of the moment onto her shoulders, and attraction rarely grows when someone feels responsible for your emotional stability. When you hold your center, you subtly communicate abundance. You show that your identity doesn't hinge on her approval, that your emotional state isn't tethered to her validation, and abundance, even perceived abundance, changes how someone values you. Scarcity makes you cling. Abundance makes you selective. Intrigue isn't about being mysterious for the sake of it. It's about having depth that isn't immediately accessible. When you don't reveal every thought instantly, you create layers, and layers invite curiosity. Curiosity fuels desire. Desire sustains attraction. The man who speaks only when it matters becomes someone worth listening to. There's also an energetic component here. When you react emotionally, your body tightens, your breathing shifts, your voice changes. But when you regulate yourself, your body stays relaxed, your tone stays steady. That physiological control communicates calm dominance without aggression, and calm dominance often carries more weight than loud authority. Over time, she begins to adjust her emotional rhythm to match yours. Humans synchronize unconsciously. If you escalate, she escalates. If you stabilize, she stabilizes. Your restraint becomes the anchor point, and once you become the anchor, you define the pace. Not through force, but through consistency. Of course, this doesn't mean never expressing yourself. Expression matters, but timing matters more. The man who chooses the right moment to speak, instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, controls impact. And impact builds respect. Respect sustains attraction long after the honeymoon phase fades. The deeper truth is this: composure creates gravity. People are naturally drawn toward what feels steady in a chaotic world. When you stop trying to win arguments and start mastering your internal state, you shift from reactive participant to centered presence. And that presence becomes difficult to ignore because it feels rare.